We live in a world just, awash with color, but have you ever really stopped to think about its impact? Like, beyond just what looks nice?
hmm
Today, we're diving into some really fascinating ideas about our relationship with color, starting with something you might not have heard of, chromophobia.
Chromophobia, exactly. And, well, it sounds maybe a bit specific, doesn't it? But it actually opens up this surprisingly wide view on how we deal with the visual world.
Okay.
Essentially, it's a persistent, sometimes irrational fear or, aversion to colors. You might also hear it called chromatophobia or even chromatophobia.
So this is more than just, like, not liking lime green. A real phobia sounds pretty serious.
It can be, yeah. Our sources do point out that a full-blown clinical phobia is, well, relatively rare.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean colors don't affect us powerfully. They can still trigger psychological and even physiological responses, hormonal ones too.
Right, because our brains are reacting to the light wavelengths.
Precisely. So even if you don't have a debilitating fear, the basic impact of color is definitely there.
And the sources mentioned another angle, too, something about design.
Yes, that's another interesting facet of this chromophobia idea, a sort of broader aversion, almost a dislike, of using color deliberately in products, design, art. Almost like a preference for starkness, for no color.
Huh. A conscious rejection of color. That's so,
Interesting.
now the material also mentioned chromophobic in biology. Cells, I think. How does that connect?
Yeah, that's actually quite distinct. So in biology, chromophobic describes cells that don't really absorb certain stains used in labs, like hematoxylin.
Oh, I see.
It's
Yeah.
basically a technical term for how cells behave in staining, related to a process called chromatolysis. Same word, but a really different meaning from the psychological or cultural aversion we're focusing on.
Got it. So different context entirely.
Yeah.
Okay, so our mission today is really to unpack these, well, sometimes quite unexpected ways color hits us, pulling together these different threads from the research.
Sounds
Let's start with those specific color phobias. Because, the fact that individual colors actually have names for their fears, that says something, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows just how potent a single color can be for some people. Take erythrophobia. That's the fear of red.
Red, okay.
And the sources note, interestingly, it's sometimes linked to hemophobia, the fear of blood, which, makes a kind of visceral sense.
It absolutely does, that immediate connection. Okay, what else?
Then there's anthophobia, fear of yellow.
Yellow. I don't immediately think of a common fear linked to yellow, not like red and blood.
No, it's maybe less obvious, but the phobia is documented.
Hmm.
And then leukophobia, the fear of white. That one seems particularly layered.
Layered, how so?
Well, the information suggests it's not always just about the color white itself. Sometimes it's tied to what one source calls implausible assumptions,
Like what?
like associating paleness with sickness or, ghosts, spookiness. It can also connect to symbolic stuff, white representing purity or chastity, and maybe those ideas provoke fear or resistance in someone.
Right, and there was that literary example, too, which really stretches the idea.
Oh, yeah, in Paul Beatty's novel, Slumberland, leukophobia is used there as a pretty powerful metaphor for racism.
Which is a huge leap from just not liking the color white. It shows how deep this stuff can run.
It absolutely does. It demonstrates how, tangled up color is in our social fabric, our emotions, way beyond just visual taste.
Wow.
And besides those, the sources list, a whole bunch more. Chrysophobia for orange, cynophobia for blue,
You go.
glaucophobia for gray, castaноphobia for brown, melanophobia, which is black,
Okay.
porphyrophobia for purple, persinophobia for green, and rhodophobia for pink.
That's quite the spectrum of fear.
It really underscores that potentially any color could become this focus of intense anxiety for someone.
Okay, so shifting gears a bit from those individual phobias, the sources also talked about a kind of broader cultural thing, a historical suspicion of color in Western culture that really surprised me.
Yeah, it's a fascinating argument. David Batchelor's book, Chromophobia, really digs into this.
Right?
He argues that historically, Western thought often kind of pitted color against things like reason or form or purity. Color was seen as maybe corrupting, superficial, or even like foreign or other.
Corrupting. Wow.
And Michael Taussig suggests this aversion might go back like 1,000 years.
1,000 years. That's a long time for an idea to stick around.
It really is. And Batchelor even traces it back further to Aristotle apparently preferring line and form over color.
So like an ancient philosophical bias against just the sensory hit of color.
Kind of, yeah. It's this long-standing sort of intellectual, maybe distrust.
How do you think that historical view might still be, subtly shaping things today?
Well, if you think about it, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does this historical tendency to downplay color still, maybe, influence our tastes in art, architecture, design?
Hmm.
Maybe even why minimalism or neutral palettes become so popular sometimes.
Hmm. Like an echo of that old bias.
Could be. It's definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. Now, completely switching tracks, I was really struck by the examples of color aversion in animals. It's not just us humans then.
Not at all, no. The animal kingdom has some pretty compelling cases, like hatchling loggerhead sea turtles.
The turtles, what do they do?
Research shows they tend to avoid light in the yellow part of the spectrum.
Why yellow?
Well, the theory is it helps them navigate. They move away from the yellow light, maybe from inland sources, towards the darker ocean horizon. It helps them find the sea.
Wow, so the aversion actually helps them survive. That's incredible. Any other examples?
Yeah, there's a small fish, the Mediterranean sand smelt. Studies observe them avoiding red objects put in their tank, but they'd check out other colors.
Just red. Huh.
And then there was that study with geese. They could be conditioned to avoid food of a certain color.
Okay, makes sense.
But here's the interesting bit. They didn't develop the same aversion if it was just water of that color.
Oh, so it wasn't just the color itself, but the color linked specifically to the food.
Exactly. It highlights how complex their visual interpretation is. It's not just a simple reaction to the hue.
So what could be the reasons behind these animal aversions, generally speaking?
Well, ecologically, it could be about avoiding predators that are a certain color, or maybe identifying safe food versus toxic food, or even potentially playing a role in mating choices. It just shows color isn't passive. It carries real information in their world.
The vital information, yeah. And speaking of information carrying like emotional weight, that example from Hitchcock's Marnie was a really powerful illustration of trauma and color aversion.
Oh, absolutely. Marnie is such a potent cinematic look at how trauma can forge these intense color associations.
With the color red, right?
Yes, the main character has this visceral, overwhelming aversion to red, and it's directly linked back to a childhood trauma. Hitchcock uses these visual cues, like suddenly washing the screen in red,
Yeah, I remember that.
to show us her internal panic, the way that memory just floods back. It makes her psychological state visible.
It's such an effective way to show that internal struggle externally. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, about our own, maybe less dramatic, past experiences and how they might shape our own subtle likes and dislikes for colors, maybe without us even realizing it.
Exactly. These associations can be incredibly personal, deep-seated, and really influential, even if we're not conscious of them.
Definitely. Now, there were also a couple of other meanings for color phobia mentioned in the sources that we should probably touch on.
Right. One was more literal, etymological, something about vision processing.
Yeah, apprehension towards image processing on one's vision. Sounds quite technical.
It does. So in that sense, color phobia might refer to some kind of difficulty or discomfort in how our visual system actually handles color information. But maybe even more important was the other historical use.
The one linked to race.
Yes. The fact that the term was used historically in discussions about racial prejudice is, well, really significant.
And Frederick Douglass used it.
He did, according to our sources, which just underscores how color, in that social sense, has been weaponized, used to create divisions and justify inequality.
Yeah.
So in that context, color phobia isn't about fearing blue or red. It's about a much deeper societal problem, prejudice based on skin color. It's a stark reminder of how complex our relationship with color truly is on so many levels.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's really clear that chromophobia is, well, it's way more than just a simple fear of colors.
Definitely.
We've seen it as, yes, a rare clinical thing, but also this historical cultural bias, a survival tool for animals, a result of psychological trauma.
And even that powerful metaphor for racism and social issues.
It's pretty striking how one word can cover such a huge range of things, isn't it?
It really is, from the very personal, psychological level right up to these big cultural and societal currents. It just highlights how much power and meaning color holds in our lives, whether we consciously clock it or not.
Absolutely. It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
Right.
I mean, considering all these different ways color can affect us, what other subtle, maybe unexpected ways might colors be influencing how we see things, how we behave, just day to day? Definitely something to ponder as you look around the world.